All right, at 6 o'clock, I'll call the meeting to order. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation,
indivisible,
and
and justice.
liberty for all.
All right. First order of business is approval of the agenda. Are there any amendments to the agenda or consent agenda? Would anyone like to make any changes to the consent agenda? We can pull that out now. All right, hearing none, is there a motion to approve the agenda as it is?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Carl. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Public comment. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak tonight? Okay. There'll be another opportunity at the end of the agenda if you change your mind for the public. All right. Consent agenda. There was, if you haven't checked your email, there was a resignation added this afternoon to that for Todd Haskins. Just want to make sure everyone is aware of that resignation. And having said that, we would be looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll make that motion.
All right, motion by Cara. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? George, Amanda, was that a yes?
Oh, sorry. I said I guess.
Okay. All right, motion carried. Then we'll move on to, I just want to make just a comment on the resignation. That we accept that with regret. Kind of a shocker, but anyway, I'll move on to reports. Superintendent's report.
Thank you, Eric. Just a few items, so I'll be brief so we can move on to the rest of the meeting. As we enter the third week of school, just want to say thank you to Corey, Carol, their staff, custodial staff as well, just for all the hard work over the summer and the first couple of weeks. It's been a great start to the school year. I've had an opportunity to be in both buildings a couple times over the past couple of weeks. It's just great to see staff and students back in the building. During the summer, schools can be a pretty lonely place. When you get the staff and the kids back in, that's when things start to liven up. So I just want to say thank you to everyone for a great start to the school year. Kind of endured some warm weather last week, but now we're back into the relative late summer, early fall weather. So I just want to say thank you to everyone. As always, at the start of the school year, we do have our GRCSU retreat or professional development staff workshop. It was 2 days. The first day was an SU-based workshop, and the second day was school-based. And I know that Corey and Carol could talk a little bit more during their reports about some of the things that they had covered over the school-based. One of the items that we did cover as an SU was we just wanted to kind of formalize or just share our visions or goals for the school year. And they are wrapped into our strategic plan, our school improvement plans. Well, but I just want to publicly just state these four, if you don't mind. But our four goals or vision statements for the year for the SU really are to ensure that all GRCSU students have access to high quality instruction and learning opportunities on a daily basis. Ensure that all GRCSU students will demonstrate academic growth, both in the areas of math and literacy, over the course of the 2023-2024 school year. Ensure that all of our students and staff feel welcome, affirmed, safe, and a part of our school communities. And ensure that we as an SU have established channels of clear and effective communication in our schools and SU amongst staff and our school communities. As I said before, you see these four goal statements. They are wrapped into our strategic plan. You will be hearing us reference these throughout the course of the year, both in our reports as well as in just weekly communications that we have to families. But these are our goals. We feel we have great schools, but we also feel we have areas to improve as well. And like I said, we have the staff to do that. So, you know, that you said was we share this little staff. We'll make sure we're all on the same page just to kind of align our goals and our vision. The last thing that I just will touch upon, as most of you are aware, last year we were doing a multiple number of assessments with our students. It was a bit concerning to me, and I know I share that with our central office staff and our admin team. I think they agreed that, you know, as we were coming out of COVID, there were a lot of assessments that we were being asked to provide to our students. We have narrowed this down. I think you will see a shift, and there'll be some communication coming out, if it's not already come out from Corey and Carol, that instead of MAP this year, we'll be using FastBridge. It is a similar type assessment. It's used to measure academic growth in all of our students in the areas of math and literacy. But it also does a nice job of providing quick intervention, you know, supports and resources to our staff as they look at how best to meet the needs. And I just want to clarify, and I clarified this at the SU as well. When we hear interventions, a lot of times we quickly default to playing a game of catch up. And yes, that is the case for some of our interventions. But with the MTSS or an EST or whenever we look at data, we are looking at how we can maximize all of our learners' potential. So, you know, if we have a student who needs to be challenged or needs to be pushed or in a different way, we'll be using this data from FastBridge and other assessments to better align course and curriculum expectations for that student, as well as for students that are identified just as needing to catch up just a bit. So the FastBridge will allow us to do this in a more timely manner. And as we go through our quarterly reports, we'll provide information for the board as best as we can, but we do know that with our class sizes, there are certain discussions that we can't have publicly just because of you know, it's in confidentiality. So we will do it as best we can to provide you with updates with that as well. And I know that Lisa Madison, our assistant superintendent who oversees curriculum instruction, will be working with our building admins on developing communications over the course of the year, just with families, just so they can better understand FastBridge and what it's really meant to do. But it is a much shorter assessment. I know that was one of the complaints that we had heard, was just the length of MAP and the loss of instructional time. And FastBridge will, we feel, better assess our students in a shorter time. So we'll allow our teachers and staff to get back to what they're doing, that is educating our kids. So are there any questions that anyone has? A lot of this other information is just, you know, it's more informative beginning of the year item. So any questions?
Questions? All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to principal reports.
You're looking smart. Let's see. Last night we had our open house, and I actually want to thank Sue Burke. She provided and prepared all of the food, and it was absolutely wonderful. We had a lot of families there. There was some conflict with football and cheerleading, so but Eric joined us and talked to the community, and I think it was a really great event. The kids were super excited about having everybody back in the building and just I don't know, kind of celebrating the school together. So it was kind of wonderful. We're just doing our first round of testing. We're doing FastBridge. And I think one of our challenges is that we still don't have an interventionist. So that makes it a little bit difficult, but the teachers are doing a great job and they're pulling together. So yeah, that's about it. And I think we're enjoying the idea that we're stored at practices wise. We're working with Corey and the team here and looking forward to seeing where that's going. There's some specific training for specific teachers on the leadership team this month. And then we'll kind of be driving our own train, so to speak. So that's about it.
So at Middletown, we've had a great start to our school year. A lot of positives, that we had that hot week that Chris spoke about. The kids were excellent. We were able to get outside. We provided extra water for the kids. Mr. Carlson put out water jugs every day. We had popsicles. So they handled that pretty well. Like Carol mentioned, we're kind of wrapping up our restorative practices training with our consultant through the AWARE grant. And I'm excited to start working with Carol on how we can take what we've learned and move it forward in a way that works best for our two small schools. Yes. And really tap into the expertise that we have in both of our buildings. Other things, I think our playground is just about complete. Scott Hathaway set up the new sandbox last week. It's been a huge hit with the kids. Carrera's generously donated sand for the sandbox, which was really wonderful. And we are hosting our open house next Wednesday from 6 to 7. Immediately prior from 5:30 to 6 o'clock, we'll be holding our annual Title I meeting. And then immediately after from 7 to 7:30, we will host our informational proficiency-based grading session for interested parents to hear more about GRCSU's proficiency-based grading system. And then the other exciting thing that we have going on is next Thursday, we have our first combined community engagement event. We're having a game night here at Middletown Springs from 6 to 7:30. So we really encourage families and community members to come join us and bring a favorite game.
And any questions for other principal?
Is this the staffing for the after-school program?
Yep. So we have worked very closely with Sarah and many conversations with the state on what we can and can't do. We have a plan in place to start on Monday. I have 2 staff members that are committed to starting with the salary that we had last year, continuing this year. I would really like a third staff member. Ratio wise, we can run it with 2, but I would feel more comfortable having a third person. Just the ratio, because we run under the pre-K license, is 1 to 10. So it really does not allow one adult to go use the bathroom or things like that. They really have to be with the kids the whole time. So I have 1 staff member who's on the fence about that, and we're going to be looking at alternatives as well. But we can start the program with what we have on Monday. So
Well, it's the same issue.
We have a different issue, which is we were running a homework club, which was not under a license. And in looking at it with Sarah Taylor and looking and talking with Sarah Crozier from the state, we were talking about what's the best way to get it so that we're covered and licensed and running a program that should be operational that way. At this point, we're working with the state to get a license in place. And so I'm not sure at
You don't
this
have a
moment, we
projected
do
time.
not have a projected time and we don't have an operational plan. It's tough. It is tough.
Thank you.
The interventionist position, that's still going to be tried to be filled, correct? For Wells?
Yes.
You don't have an interventionist, so I'm
We-
just assuming it's still posted.
I was thinking that was something that was going to be here tonight about that,
Uh,
but I didn't see,
no, I didn't see,
I'm not sure what I'm at liberty to say.
I just curious.
It's not in any of the material.
Amanda?
Sorry, I was delayed in my hand raise. I kind of had the same question. I was wondering about the interventionist as well, and is that something that we could quickly discuss? Is there a reason in the interim while we're waiting to fill a position at Wells that we can't potentially share our position at Middletown?
We actually looked at that option and contractually that is not an option for us. We potentially have an answer, it's just not present tonight.
All right, any other questions for
So
principals?
Eric, I will say, what Carol was alluding to, there may be an email that goes out to board for approval of a position, similar we've done in the past in between board meetings. so we can have the person start and then, at the next board meeting, formally approve that individual.
Okay. Yeah, I think we have done that before.
Correct.
And would you like the board to pre-approve?
So I think, Eric, the practice we've done in the past, if that would suffice, I wouldn't feel comfortable pre-approving a candidate that we don't know it's official or not. So I think it's better to formally approve a candidate when they're ready to go. And if the board feels more comfortable, we could do a quick emergency meeting just to formally approve that to a 5-minute Google Meet. But I think we can discuss that when.
Okay.
All we need is 24 hours to warn a special meeting for something like that, and it would literally be a 5-minute meeting to approve that. If the board feels more comfortable with that approach as well, I'm fine with either one.
All right.
I think our goal is just to get an individual in the classroom or to start working with our students as quickly as possible. So.
Okay. All right. So if there's no other questions, we'll move on to finance. So the monthly financials are in the packet. Lewis isn't here, but if you had any additional questions about that, you can reach out to him. Also, just a quick heads up, in the materials you'll find the budget timeline. This was shared at the GRCSU meeting last week, and I thought that this would be good information for the board to have. Lewis is going to come to our meeting next month and talk about this more, but if you look at the timeline on that agenda, we're going to be discussing board priorities, budget parameters, and such. So it's just kind of informational, like a heads up for the board to expect that budget discussion coming up next month.
Eric, can I also make a request as well, please, around this? So if any board member, if there's information that you feel that the board would need for the October, November board meetings, particularly I should say November board meeting, just come prepared to discuss, and that way Lewis and I can put together a list of information so we can then have all this information as part of the board packet for you. So I know that typically during budget cycles, people will send us individual requests outside of board meetings, and it's always best to have the full board request the information at a board meeting. So
yeah, I mean, that was my thought behind
the
whole timeline. That Matt.
Hey, thanks. So I understand this is a contract year for Betcha and our transportation. So I brought this up last meeting, but I'm curious if we could get a quote for Middletown Springs pickup and transfer to Wells. And I'm not thinking for this year, but if we're looking 5 years from now or 10 years from now, seeing if we're going to merge schools or do anything like that, just if we can during the contract year have them do that route planning for us and give us a baseline at least that we can, if we ever have to do this type of planning, we have those figures at least in front of us.
Okay. Yeah, I think there's going to be more discussion about that later on. So, all right, so we're going to move on to new business. So in the materials, you'll have our finalized goals, the work that we did over the summer. Did anyone have any questions or anything they would like to bring up about the board goals that we worked on? I would say that it would probably be good that, since this is that we like formally, I guess, adopt these or accept these goals. Um, for this year. Discussion?
Are you looking for a motion to adopt these goals, or would you
Yeah, or
like?
accept them. Yeah, something like that. I think it would be good that, that the board, this being, we did the work, in July, and I think in August, I don't think we really formally did anything with them, but, just, yeah.
Okay, I would be happy to make a motion to accept those goals.
Okay.
Is that along with the work plan or?
No,
I was gonna say, that was my question. Are we talking about the work plan or the page of goals? Like, so just
just the
the
goal.
3 goals? Okay. I mean, those are the same goals from last year, but the goal statements below them are really what is new that we'd be accepting, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And then last
Okay.
year, we had our retreat and we had a lot of discussion, but it didn't really, I don't think it really formulated into anything that, until we did this other part, where we actually put it into, statements and it made sense, that's kind of the way I see it, but yeah. All right, so, any other discussion on this? Matt, you had your hand up.
No, mine was the same question everybody else had about the action items.
Okay. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
George, are you still there? Sorry, I gotta ask. All right, motion carries. I'm just gonna assume maybe it's connection issues or something. All right. All right, so now the work plan. So, this is the work plan that, Kathy shared with us, what we did at our August, second retreat meeting. Basically, I just wanted to bring this to everyone, kind of like, just so everyone can see what we're going to be working on. And, this is going to essentially be agenda-related items that focus on the goal work and the work plan. I think that this plan can change, as far as like timeline, who does what and where. But the community engagement, I think a lot of the community engagement committee stuff has already started a lot of this work or done or completed some of this work. Yeah. And, again, it's also here for discussion as well. So did anyone have any comments, questions, concerns about the work plan moving forward?
I really like it. It's a good job, everyone.
I know she did a really good job on it. Okay. All right. Now we'll move on to C, one of the things on our work plan. I will add. So at our last retreat meeting, we had a lot of discussion about consolidation, the schools, moving forward as far as budget concerns and it being sustainable. And so I think that some of the start of the discussions that we had at that meeting are a great time for us to talk about it now. So when we talk about exploring consolidation models, that would essentially kind of be changing the composition of the schools to have potentially one school pre-K through 3 and another school pre-K 4 through 6. And I think that hearing from other board members as well on this topic, that the discussion should start now. And I know, Matt, you kind of brought up like the transportation piece to that, but I think one of the first steps when we talk about this is what the board envisions going forward. If this is something that the board would like to pursue, and then again, the next step would be the next steps on achieving this. So I'll open it up for discussion. I think, yeah.
I just entering into, putting out into the ether about considering looking at a model where pre-K is run in both buildings, just because of the additional challenges of licensing and ratio and transportation for kids under 5. It may actually be cheaper to have a second teacher than it is to staff a bus with 3 and 4-year-olds. Just considerations around that.
Okay. I have a hard time with that.
Me too.
Amanda?
I think that it's definitely something that needs to be discussed, and I'm glad that we're bringing it up now. But I also think that before we discuss it too deeply, the discussion we should have should be around how we're getting the public's input. I think that we need to come up with some way. Maybe it's 2 or 3 questions. Maybe we put it out at election again and wait until then. Because even though we got some funky responses, we did get some answers. I think we really need to hear from our communities before we dig too deeply, just to see what their needs might be that we might be missing. But I definitely think it's something that needs to take place. I just want to make sure that we reach out to our communities and cover everything kind of right off the bat.
Okay. Matt?
Considering, when we went through the last budget cycle, we didn't have a lot available to change, other than those three areas that we looked at. So potentially merging schools would give us some more space there in the budget. But I would be good with it as long as it also created value for our students. For example, having a full-time language teacher, things of that nature. If it allowed us to provide more things for our students, and it wasn't just a matter of, I just think we just have to keep that in mind. In other words, just making sure that we're also creating more things for our students by doing this. But I do like the idea of potentially doing this. So, and as an exercise or in real life. Thanks.
Okay.
Can you hear me? Oh, sorry. Did you have trouble hearing me before? Sorry.
Yeah,
Can you
I
hear
can
me?
hear you now. Yep.
And I see Meredith, I saw your hand was up, Meredith, after I started talking. I apologize. Do we have a way to forecast student enrollment? Because if this change won't be made for 2 to 5 years, we don't need to know who's currently in 4th through 6th grade. We need to know who's being born right now, kind of thing. Is there a way to find that information out? Maybe town clerks have it. I don't know.
We don't know them until they're moved in. You know, that's always a tough number. And that was actually part of my comment is how flexible are we with, like, just doing a quick look at the numbers. It'd be a little lopsided to only have 4, 5, and 6 in one school, even with pre-K. Be like 50 plus 10, 60 versus 8, which is doable because that's what we're looking at. But but I guess the question is how, kind of in what Cara is saying, how flexible, or how do we become flexible in determining what the needs, what years we have.
Yeah.
At which school.
Right, and I think, you know, this is the beginning of a longer conversation too, because this isn't something that's gonna happen in the next year or so. I think there's a tremendous amount of planning and input and really just figuring out how it's gonna look. I mean, does it make sense to do 1 through, you know, pre-K 1 through 3 and then pre-K 4, 5, 6? Or does it make sense to do pre-K 1 through 4, pre-K 5 through 8, and then retain secondary students, you know?
Yeah, but do you know what we ran into during the merger is that there's all this science requirements when you get into the 5th through 8th, and we would have to build science lab rooms and equip them. And that becomes a very expensive thing. Just, that's one of, because we talked about merging with Rutland Town during our merger process, and we talked about where we'd put people, etc. So there's a whole different curriculum issue there, and the science becomes prohibitive, or not prohibitive, but very costly.
Yep. George? George, you have your hand up.
All right. Along those lines, I was wondering if Chris were aware of any districts that have done this, so we had a model to look at, or where could we go to look at examples of this process? So when we're asked questions, we can tell, we have a feel for, and we can relay that information to our parents. This is what it may look like.
So George, off the top of my head, I don't have that information. I know that tomorrow I'm at a VSA all members meeting at Killington. I could start asking around just to see, you know, what's out there. I know that in other states that I've worked in that this has been done, but I think I want to steer clear of that because I think I just want to look at other Vermont schools that have done this because I think there are situations unique to Vermont that we want to make sure we take into consideration here. So I'll start asking around. I can have that information.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. Look at Vermont. Thank you for that. And if there's anywhere we could look, members of the board, please let us know as well. On the other thing on modeling and forecasting for the future, we used to get that information from the state in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Do you know if the AOE offers that type of information? No, probably not.
That's optimistic. That'd be great if they did, but we have not seen numbers like that yet.
Okay, thank you.
That's something which we could, through this process, we could work on projection through Lewis, through working with our towns as well. Could have a rough projection.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, so I think you know there's a lot of good ideas and a lot of things to take into consideration, and you know perhaps we can you know have our superintendent bring back some information you know around I guess you know some of these concerns and you know basically, I think that, as we look at, how this might look in the schools, so I would imagine that, a lot of this, would also need to be coordinated with principals and, I guess a good starting point, is just, information. So, like you pointed out, science, what would that look like in our school? I mean, would 7th and 8th graders need a full lab? And if would that cost be offset by having secondary students rather than paying secondary tuition? I don't know. Maybe there's just too much to think about all at once.
It definitely has to be broken down.
Yeah.
Yeah, Eric, that's what I was going to suggest. Maybe the board should set like a path, because I think there's just a lot to consider, but there are things we're considering now that really we shouldn't be considering now. I think we can really get into the weeds. And I think first just my recommendation would be, work with the community, just get feedback from the community and really set a vision, because I know even if I'm out looking for information, it'd be helpful if I knew specifically what I'm looking for and what are the reasons, the rationale as well. Because if it's, as Matt said, an opportunity to increase the experiences and programming for our students, that's one thing. If it's also for be fiscally responsible, I think there are different approaches, because I've seen both in different states I've worked at around this. But I think it's important in terms of why we're doing this and what we're looking to do. And you really have to kind of set a plan in place in terms of how you're going to gather information, how you're going to collect community feedback, input, and then based upon that, how you're going to move forward. So I'm not trying to add any other committees or anything, but I do think it's something which it's something which would need to, like I said, you really have to have another work plan, but a work plan in place. Because I've been involved in this, and it is a very daunting prospect where you really have a year of information gathering and just to see if this is something we really want to do. And then once they say, okay, we want to look more, then there's another year of planning. And so it's a long, arduous process, which is good. It's a good process, but.
I agree. I mean, there's definitely a lot. There's a lot to think about. And all right, Amanda.
I don't mean to suggest more meetings, and like Chris said, not more committees, but do we think that at least for the next couple of months, it might be beneficial to hold 2 meetings a month, one specifically for this possibility and one for a meeting, even if it's quick, like we have a half hour. I just think we're going to take up a lot of meeting time doing this too for the next year. Should we set a different time to go over the information we've gathered without making it committee work? Or do we, I just don't know what the most efficient way to do it is. What are your thoughts, Chris?
Well, like I said, community input is going to be important, because if the community comes back and resoundingly says, no, we would like to keep our current structure, and that's, the board has to be responsive or, attentive to those needs. I think when you have community, you can't just have a meeting, just have a meeting. They have to be focused. They have to, understand exactly what is the purpose and what we're working towards. It's not just, hey, what are your thoughts? So, that's an aspect of this, but we have to give them something to respond to. So I think that's part of that plan. I think there are a lot of people who will hear about this. And I'm sure by the end of the evening, there are, people like, wait, what's going on with which, like we're split into 2 schools. Wait, when did this happen? No, I think that, the messaging has to be very important around. This is just something that's the board is looking to explore and wants input and feedback on. But I think you have to also just, choose the avenues in which you do that and what's the most appropriate. So
I like that, that description, explore. George?
I agree. I don't think we need an extra committee or extra meetings at this point. We have to maybe assign some people or find a way to do a lot of research and information gathering that someone could bring back and present to the board. As far as reaching out to community, Amanda, I think we've got our committee already, and we should be brainstorming ways to put the most positive spin besides cost savings on this. We like just off the top of my head, we have issues retaining people who are traveling from school to school, where perhaps we could focus language arts at one school and have that person only reside there and make that position more attractive and more likely to hold on to them.
Matt?
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, I was gonna say I'm all for improving the student experience, but also I kind of want to know, it doesn't really make sense if it's not going to save money. So is this something that Lewis could look at, like with very little direction, and come back with a plan and like how much this would save us if we did this? I know there's like a lot of vagueness to that, but I mean, at least as a starting point, we could have something to look at and start from as a board with somewhat of an informed opinion.
And I think a cost analysis at this point would be difficult to provide, just because there are a lot of variables. I think, because you'd still be operating two schools. I think the big question would be, as you look at staffing, and the impacts of that. But I think, we're at an exploratory stage. I think it's one, if that's, like I said, you're looking at ways to, expand programming for our students. So as we look at, what impact it would have as we go from 2 second grades to 1 second grade, but then we have an additional staff member who could provide experiential learning for our students, or like an outdoor course for our students. And so I think that's some discussions that the board would have to have is around this. And I said with the community, I said we're way off in terms of some of that, but I think we could. I think a cost analysis would be very difficult to provide because, like I said, cost of transportation. There's just a lot of things that we're looking at. So,
in my mind, it's transportation and staffing, like you pointed
Right.
out. If having the two schools existing, so it's just those two areas. What does that open up for us, and does that even make sense to even start there? So, yeah, I mean, I think it's not a horrible exercise if you can do it. That'd be, I think, helpful from like just looking at those two things. I don't know if others think that that's a waste of time, but it could help us at least get some footing into this.
Amanda?
I think I agree with Matt. If we could start somewhere and then we could have a number to know what we have to work with to expand. If we see the savings is X number of dollars and we take half of that and say, okay, we'd like to use half of this savings to expand, then at least we know what our expansion options might possibly be. And then there's still a savings and an expansion. So if Lewis was able and had time, I think something, even if it's a rough estimate and it's very clear that it's a rough estimate, like, hey, keeping everything exactly the way it is, except splitting K2 into one and 3-6 into another, what would that change for staffing, and what potential cost savings and the transportation piece, and then we would have a number to know what we could work with, I guess, even though it would be very vague. I think it would be a financial starting point for us. I don't know how everyone else feels.
Well, I think in hearing what Chris was saying, before we go and utilize central office time and figuring out without knowing which direction to go, hearing from the community on this, to me, would make sense on a first step. I mean, we could do a lot of this and there could be a substantial objection from both communities. But the, you know, the other part to that is the, I guess, the fiscal responsibility. Meredith?
I feel like it'd be very difficult to give any sort of real presentation to a community without a few facts. Or, you know, fuzzy facts. Because we'll be having this kind of a conversation, which is just gonna go round and round.
Mhm.
You know, we have to say, well, this is, you know, this is what a round budget might look like and what we might be able to offer, or this is what we could save by doing this. But without any, and it's budget time, I get it, but this is part of the process. And I think trying to do all of this in a year is probably like crazy. I think this is gonna take a lot longer than a year.
Yeah, and I think everybody kind of gets, or not everybody, I think when we talked at the retreat, we said it was going to be longer than a year. My worry is that people will hear like rumors of school closing and conflate it with the current budget cycle. And so, like, you know, what do we want our timeline to be for community forums? Because I don't want to have a community forum in, you know, December or January and talk about this and then ask people to vote in February, March, thinking that they're voting for a consolidation when really we're just taking information. And so cart versus horse versus not imperiling our current budget cycle.
Yeah, I can see that happen.
So sorry, I don't know. Where do we stand with asking Lewis to create that budget? Is this a distraction? Is this something everybody's in favor for?
So, Matt, I'm just going to say, I think Lewis, as he's trying to prepare budgets for SU and our local districts to then undertake this exercise, I think right now it may take a backseat. We can provide but it goes back to what Meredith says, just is it, you know, responsible for us to provide a fuzzy forecast, or I think we just need clear direction in terms of where the board would like to take this, and then we can provide information around that. So, because you know, this is beginning a very busy time for us, just with the regular budget cycles.
Yeah. Amanda?
What if we set a timeline to gather information slowly without driving central office crazy between now and April? And then by April, we have some more firm information to pitch to the public, hear from the public, and then take it from there. That gives us the next few months to kind of feel things out and put our heads together with potential ideas, get through budgeting, get this budget passed, this next budget passed, and then pitch something else to the public. April might be kind of a decent timeline.
I mean, because we said for realistic process change, the absolute earliest anything, like if everything went perfectly, the absolute potential earliest any change of any close to this nature. They're trying to say, like, we're not making any changes, but if we went down a road, the 2025 school year is potentially it, but 26, 27 would be more within the better realm of planning. Am I remembering that right, Chris? Or
I think FY26 would be realistically the earliest, because I think this year is, and you're going to need a year to plan to make shift around that, and so I think you're looking at the FY, like I said, 25, 26 school year at the earliest, if there are any adjustments.
And in those, 36 months, we will have potentially gone to bid, definitely done contract renegotiations with the transportation provider. with at least one set of either teachers or support staff. And so all of those pieces will play into this process, correct? So, I mean, like, I want the information because it does feel better, like, to make decisions about off of real facts, but I think the facts are potentially going to change significantly in even just the next 18 months, right?
Yes, that's a fair assessment, Kara.
Well, they're gonna change, they're gonna increase. I mean, it's all gonna probably be relatively the same in terms of proportions and percentages. And if we don't do anything, they're all gonna increase, so, we really need to determine whether going this course is going to do what we want it to do.
Exactly what Alex said.
And if it isn't, what's our alternative?
I think Chris's question is, what do we want it to do? Maybe that's the root cause analysis we need to do, is come up with a statement about if consolidation were to happen, it would be to resolve the issue of X and Y. And the vision of what our schools would provide to our community because of resolving these issues is Z. Like, we want to reduce costs and maintain a great student experience. This will be because of operating 2 specialized schools where they can offer more targeted instruction to prepare our students for B. Like, does that make sense?
Yep.
Yep.
And that gives us a clearer message for the community.
George?
Kara kind of said what I was thinking. We've got board goals to offer the best experience to our students and to be fiscally responsible. That's why we're doing this. I can't think of any other reason.
But I think us articulating what that looks like in our vision is, because people can hear fiscal responsibility in a bunch of different ways. And they can hear high quality student experience in a bunch of different ways. Some people might think sports teams, some people might think physical plant, some people might think different languages being taught. Like, what do we hope to add or maintain? Articulating that might be a good next step. Setting a vision.
Those are the details. You're right.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. And again, as I said before, it would be nice to see a model of how another district might have gone through this. What were the bumps? What were the successes? And in the end, what did they feel were the positive outcomes?
Amanda?
I think also a statement too that might kind of go along with what Cara was saying is it would eliminate our combined classes. We would have a first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. That might be something that the community had input on that might help or not when it comes to these discussions. But we would have enough students to have a classroom for every class. So that might also extend options for each of those classes as well.
Well, options too, and the larger each class is, the less likely it is to be combined.
Yeah. Muted.
Sorry. I'm curious also to see if there's other schools that have done this, other school districts, and if not, if there's resources for us potentially being the first ones to go through it. If there was extra money or resources that would come and help us if we were seriously considering this, and the state wanted to to be our partner on this journey. So curious to see if there's resources or anything like that, or specialists. Thank you.
Amanda?
Sorry, a million thoughts. Also, I think maybe before we really hear from the community and figure out what we're going to pitch to the community and how we're going to ask for their input, maybe we should put something together for our staff first. They're the ones on the front lines in the buildings with our kids every single day. I think maybe we are skipping a step and we need to hear from the people in the building before we ask to hear from the people outside of the building. So maybe our first goal should be, what does this look like and what questions do we have for the people in our buildings? Because they might have better ideas to really put us together before we go to the community.
I would support asking the staff for information, but maybe not necessarily in relation to consolidation, but in terms of, you know, are there like gathering information about, like, in my meeting facilitation hat, this would be like the magic wand question of, like, if you were able to just have a single grade classroom, what would be what would be the benefits that you would provide? Like, what changes would you make? I don't know how to kind of capture that in this situation, and I think there's a lot of places we can get input in designing, and from our staff. Yeah,
and I was thinking, like, art and music wise too. Like, our teachers might find, hey, if we had the opportunity to expand our art program, they might, you know, look at something differently within their structure of their classroom. Or I don't know. I just think that there's pieces that we should hear from them first. But I understand, not in the consolidation sense, but also they should. I feel like it should be in the consolidation sense because they should know that that's upcoming. I don't know.
yeah. Maybe the higher level ask is of Corey and Carol to think about, where are economies of scale preventing you from advancing a program? Like, where are your class sizes just too small to make it worth it? And where, like, just do a self-assessment of your school. I mean, and get staff input and do what you do as administrators to gather information. But I think doing a self-assessment of each school and where they're at and where consolidation could potentially benefit, and where you guys are doing great because you're small and a pre-K through 6, kind of a pro-con list. Does that make sense? And of course, Chris is your actual supervisor, so he would have to say that's a yay idea or a nay idea. But like, not getting input from too many people too fast, because I think that can muddy the waters when we haven't actually agreed on our goal statement, if that makes sense.
George?
I think we're throwing a lot of the steps out there in the open, things that we're going to have to do at some point, when we really need a timeline. Like, what should we be doing when? Yeah, we have to be involved with the principals, but are we ready to even ask them the questions that were just put forth? I think we need to do a little homework and possibly make a very rough timeline, working backwards from when and if this happens, what steps needed to happen first.
Yeah, I suggested starting with principals because for me it's important to get a scope of the situation as it is currently before you can plan for a change. But yeah, I agree. We need a timeline. I think that's one of the things I asked for at the retreat was, like, can we get a timeline? We need a timeline to share with people about what's going to happen when and what the decision points are.
Okay. All right. So, it sounds like everyone seems to want to head in this direction on exploring, what this might look like. So we can do that. We can put this on another agenda that we can work on, and we can all brainstorm between now and then. individually, of course, and come back and we can work on a timeline that makes sense on, I guess, what information we would like to have moving forward. Does that sound fair?
Yes.
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 Okay, and I think that might give the administration a little bit better direction as well. All right, so we'll do that. All right, any other final thoughts before I move on?
Sorry. Yeah. So can you just, I want to make sure I have this. Can you clarify what we should be prepared to bring in or do for next meeting in terms of timeline? Like, think of a task and then like what the optimal timeline would be for in this process.
Yeah, so I mean, when we think about the timeline for this process, you know, basically what information should come first. That's my thought. And what when we need that information by and so on, you know.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So the discussion will move on to policy. All right, so we just have a few first reads on here that are up for discussion. Did anyone have anything that they wanted to point out on these? These were approved by the SU board for last week. If not, they will come back as second reads to be adopted. So if nobody has anything on these, we would look for a motion to warn these for adoption.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by George, discussion. All right, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Motion carries. And then we have a policy on here that needs to be rescinded. We'll need a motion for this. And just a reminder, this policy is being rescinded because we have a new policy, E11, that kind of invalidates this one.
I'll
I'll
make a
move to-
motion, we rescind.
I heard George. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, motion carries. No executive session tonight. General public comments. Heather, I saw your hand up earlier. So first, if you speak.
Yeah, I guess I just have some general feedback and questions. I mean, I understand the reasons for the merger process and everything, but I think as Chris is kind of alluding to, as you get further away from the actual classroom, it can be more challenging to execute on some of these larger projects. Like, we don't have the resources at the SU level to do, you know, deep dives for any particular school district. And so I highlight that just to kind of reflect on the topic at large with respect to school mergers and stuff. The merger itself that has taken place, and then any future changes that are being contemplated. I think that, you know, I know that, like, when we talk about higher ed, we're talking about like the teacher to pupil ratio and that kind of thing, and like how important that is for learning outcomes. And fundamentally, I think if you're keeping two buildings open, you still have to pay for trash, for cooks, for custodians. for all the admin help that is currently in place, and like truly the only places where you would be reducing overhead, quote unquote, is by cutting staff. And so, like, to me, that just means that you're going to have a double, that are double in an environment where it's already harder, it's getting harder and harder to like affect change as these scenarios play out in our communities. And I would just like to have that be something that people are considering when they're talking about this. Like, what does that mean? Like having class sizes that are twice what they would be now. And I understand that like there's certain instances where you're merging, a 5th and 6th grade class or whatever because of class sizes between the two schools, but does it really benefit the children to ultimately have 20 kids in a class instead of 10 in a 1st grade class? Just for example, like with the 1st grade class in Middletown. So I guess I'm just here as a community member. Conversation this evening, and that's what I want to share.
Okay. Thank you. Tammy?
Good evening. Just a couple comments on the whole merger thing too. I think you guys are all asking the right questions and thinking the same things. And kind of like what Heather just said too. I mean, the only benefit I could foresee in doing this is if we were looking to shut down a school and just knock it down to one school. Unless when you're doing what you're talking about, you're going to eliminate a 1st grade teacher, 2nd grade teacher, and so on and so forth. So just, you got to keep in mind the teacher contracts when you're doing that, if there's anything in there about class size. The other thing is just, I know you guys talked about going through 8th grade. I think our towns are small, and it's kind of a benefit once they get to go to 7th grade to these bigger schools to get more experience, more exposure to more friends. And knowing that the sports is huge with these kids and getting them out there and be active. And I know as it is in these small schools, it's hard enough to try to get somebody to be a coach for sports and find the referees and all that stuff. And I think you're going to be trying to put on a lot for that. And even when you come to JV sports, a lot of times they like to pull up the 8th graders if their classes are too small in 9th grade. So that's just something else to think about as well. So, and the town clerk does have all the bursts in the town. And I know that at least in Wells, Mackenzie's always had a good grasp on siblings, younger siblings too, because the Woodman asks for numbers every year for our Christmas thing. So that kind of gives us an idea as well. So the numbers are out there. Oh, and if you want to add a big bonus in my budget next year, that'd be great.
All right. Thank you, Tammy.
Yep.
All right, Mary? You're muted, Mary.
Okay, there I am.
Okay.
Yeah, so I just had a couple things. So one thing that kind of came to mind is that Vermont as a state has been pushing for a population increase for about 5 to 6 years now. And then with the pandemic, I know that we've seen new families, even my own, move in the last 5 or 6 years. So I just would encourage you guys to wonder if this is a trend that we're going to see larger numbers in 1st and 2nd and 3rd grade. And then, coming into this year, like I know the pre-K has 6, kindergarten has 6, and then it kind of obviously increases from there. So pre-K can be kind of a number that is kind of shocking to people when we have 15 pre-Kers. But then again, some of them stay in pre-K for another year and some of them move on to kindergarten. So I just, would wonder if there's a way that we could see if this trend is going to continue to expand with children in our community or not. As far as, I kind of would want to double back on what Tammy said. I think with talking to people, and that's what I do a lot of the times when I pop on these these meetings. Anything I hear here, I usually try to say, hey, blah, blah, did you hear about the meeting or whatever? So, as far as, kind of, and of course, in doing that, I would hope that more people hop on so they could see what you guys are really doing, see what you're talking about, and kind of address those situations as they come up. So I know that the community, at least a little bit, has been talking about the next couple of years as far as, if we will close the school down versus, what the SU is suggesting as far as, kind of combining the grades. And just another thing,
Mary, can
Yeah.
I just clarify? The SU is not suggesting anything. The
Oh,
board.
okay.
So this is not an SU. This is the board is looking to explore. So I just want to correct you on that. So I know that, people like to demonize the SU, but this is not an SU thing. So thank you.
Okay, sorry, Chris.
It's
Yeah,
actually a thing that has been discussed going back at least the 10 years that I've been on the board. This is
Oh, okay.
not a new idea.
Okay. Yep. Sorry.
Thank you, Meredith.
Yep. Sorry. I wasn't on for the first couple minutes of the meeting. So, okay. So this is definitely something that the board is coming to the community about. And then, just one other thing about just as far as busing. I know that when we transferred and Mr. Beal retired, we lost our bus driver. And so I know that I'm sure Corey's doing everything she can to find somebody to kind of fill that void. But I know in a lot of different schools that's been tough. And then the last thing, just really quickly, is that I was able to substitute for my son Christopher's class, the second grade, on Friday. And I know this is, I'm sure it's come up a bunch of times, but the classrooms were so hot that day. So I varied between a classroom that was between 80 and 82 to a classroom that was between 82 and 84 for library. So just moving forward, and Chris had stopped in that one day, and, just mentioned a couple things that they had been thinking about, but I just think it's really important that, we look into how to, better equip our kids and our teachers in an environment that they are able to learn, and that we built this, beautiful schoolhouse in 1901 for Vermont winters. So we have these, big, beautiful windows, lots of light. But honestly, it was, more than uncomfortable to teach. And then obviously these little guys are trying to get through this heat without AC in my room at all, or a fan or anything, and trying to learn on a Friday with a substitute. So I knew that was kind of difficult, but I just wanted to maybe bring that up to Eric if that's something that we can explore or talk about at another meeting, to just really think about updating our AC equipment in probably both schools. I just think it's really imperative that we get on top of that.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mary. I'll just say a couple things. I think, that conversation would probably start on the air conditioning with the building administrator first. And then, as far as, I just want to thank everyone for their comments on the consolidation. It does, again, it's something that's being explored, and no one's talking about shutting down schools. I think that's kind of the whole point, is to keep that from happening. Because I know that both communities love their small schools, but having said that, if there's no other public comment, our next meeting is October 11th, Wells Village School. As I mentioned earlier, we'll be talking about budget timeline, and then of course we'll probably have some more discussion on this as far as the timeline plan goes. So if there's no other final thoughts from board members, motion to adjourn at 7:15 would be in order.
Oh, I'll make that motion.
All right, motion by Matt. All those in favor?
Hi.
All right.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.